That night, Naomi returned to the vault. She pressed play on another of David's videos, needing his guidance more than ever. His image filled the screen, his eyes piercing through time. "They'll try to divide you, Naomi," he said. "They'll target Chloe. She's their easiest path. Prepare yourself. Protect her, even when she doesn't see the danger. And remember, everything you need to fight them is already in your hands." Naomi closed the laptop, her tears blurring the maps and files spread across the war room table. The battle for Crestwood was no longer just about land or money. It was about her daughter's soul, and Naomi vowed she would not lose her. Naomi awoke before dawn, the shadows of Crestwood stretching long across the valley. Sleep had abandoned her, replaced by a restless fire that burned hotter with each passing hour. The memory of Chloe standing beside Marcus haunted her. But so did the words from David's video. Everything you need to fight them is already in your hands. She descended into the vault, the cold concrete walls both oppressive and strangely comforting. Here, away from the world above, she felt closer to David, closer to his mind, his strategy, his hidden war. She spread the maps across the central table, tracing the lines with her fingers. The resort's Phase 2 development, the parcels of land already purchased, and Crestwood, a single holdout, glowing red with importance. Beside the maps lay the thick folder of incriminating documents, fraudulent transfers, shell companies, evidence of insider trading. David hadn't just gathered dirt, he had assembled a case airtight enough to crush his brothers in court. Naomi realized that while grief had blinded her, David had always seen the battle coming, and now it was her turn to carry the sword. That morning, she called Mr. Harrison, the attorney who had first handed her the Crestwood key. He arrived within hours, his briefcase in hand, his face grave. "You've seen what David left?" he asked as they stood in the war room. Naomi nodded, sliding the incriminating folder toward him. "It's all here. Enough to bury them if we have to." Harrison flipped through the pages, his brows rising higher with each document. Good Lord, David was meticulous. These aren't just suspicions. These are smoking guns. If this gets to court, Marcus and Elijah could face prison. Naomi's jaw tightened. "Then why do I still feel like they're winning?" "Because intimidation works," Harrison replied bluntly. "They know you're grieving, and they know Chloe is vulnerable. Their best chance isn't in court. It's in breaking you before you get there." Naomi folded her arms. "Then we don't give them that chance." Harrison regarded her for a moment, then nodded. "What do you want to do?" Naomi took a deep breath. "I want to fight, but not recklessly. I need leverage. Something that forces them to back down before this ever reaches trial." Harrison leaned back, considering. "There's one route, Summit Resorts. If you can position yourself as the key to their expansion, you gain power. The brothers lose their bargaining chip, and Summit, well, they'll want to negotiate with the person who actually holds the deed." Naomi's mind raced. David had already mapped out Phase 2, the part Summit had hidden. If she showed them that she knew their secrets, she could turn Crestwood into her fortress and bargaining table at once. That evening, Chloe returned to Crestwood, her eyes wary, her shoulders tense. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, stepping into the study. Naomi braced herself. "About Marcus?" Chloe's eyes flashed with irritation. "About Dad. About why he lied to us. Why he built this place in secret. Uncle Elijah said Dad wasn't of sound mind when he bought Crestwood. Is that true?" Naomi's anger flared, but she kept her voice calm. "No, it's not true. Your father knew exactly what he was doing. He hid his illness, yes. He thought he was protecting us. But he bought this estate for love, not madness." Chloe's expression faltered, torn between doubt and longing. "Come with me," Naomi said, leading her down to the vault. She set the laptop on the table and pulled up the video David had recorded just for Chloe. His face appeared, softer, gentler than the first video Naomi had seen. "Chloe," he began, his voice tender, "my little star. If you're watching this, it means I couldn't tell you myself, and I'm sorry. I wanted to spare you pain, but I also wanted to give you something beautiful, something permanent. Crestwood is for your mother, but it's for you too. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And don't let my brothers twist this into something it's not. They'll try. Please, sweetheart, don't believe them." Chloe's eyes brimmed with tears. She pressed a hand to her mouth, shaking her head. He knew they'd come for me." Naomi wrapped her arms around her daughter, holding her tightly. Yes, he knew, and he trusted us to stand together. That's why he left this, so we wouldn't have to doubt. For the first time since Marcus's intrusion, Chloe's loyalty wavered back toward her mother. What do we do now? She whispered. Naomi kissed her temple. We fight, together. Over the next days, Naomi began to craft her counterattack. She organized David's documents, digitized them, and locked them behind multiple passwords. Harrison drafted preliminary motions, ensuring the brothers knew she wasn't afraid of court. And Miss Jackson quietly reached out to trusted local contacts, feeding Naomi information about Summit's executives. Finally, Naomi arranged a meeting with Summit's CEO, Mr. Alston, in Los Angeles. When she entered the gleaming glass tower, she carried David's folder tucked beneath her arm. Mr. Alston greeted her with a corporate smile, but that smile faltered when she laid out the map of Phase 2, the one Summit had concealed. You've been dishonest with your investors, Naomi said calmly, and you've underestimated me. Crestwood isn't just an old family estate. It's the linchpin of your entire expansion. Without it, Phase 2 collapses. You know that, and now I do too. Mr. Alston's expression hardened. What exactly are you proposing, Mrs. Sterling? Naomi leaned forward, her voice steel. That you deal with me. Not Marcus, not Elijah, me. You want Crestwood? Then you'll agree to my terms. Preservation of the conservatory and studio, no forced sale, and partnership, not takeover. Alston studied her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he smiled. You've inherited more than party from David, Mrs. Sterling. You've inherited his cunning. Very well. I'll consider your terms. Naomi left the meeting with her head held high. For the first time, she felt the tide turning. That night, back at Crestwood, she gathered Chloe and Miss Jackson in the war room. She spread the maps, the documents, and the notes from her meeting across the table. This is our plan, she said firmly. We fight them on two fronts, legally, with David's evidence, and strategically, with Summit's cooperation. They think they can corner us. Instead, we'll corner them. Chloe looked at her mother, pride mingling with fear. Mom, you're not the same woman who walked into this house 2 weeks ago. Naomi smiled faintly, her hand brushing the orchid David had left on the laptop. No, that woman was grieving. This woman is ready for war. The Sterling brothers arrived at Crestwood as though they owned the road leading up to it. Their black SUV purred confidently up the gravel drive, followed by a silver sedan with tinted windows. Naomi and Chloe stood by the study window, watching. Naomi's tailored suit was a deliberate choice. Black, sharp-lined, a signal that she was no longer a grieving widow but a woman prepared to battle. Chloe wore navy blue, simple yet strong, her father's watch glinting on her wrist. They're here, Chloe whispered, her jaw tight. Remember, Naomi said, steady, we let them speak first, we let them corner themselves. Miss Jackson appeared quietly at the door. The dining room is ready. Mr. Harrison has the documents in place. The projector works as planned. Naomi nodded. Everything had been prepared with meticulous precision, David's kind of precision. When the doorbell rang, Miss Jackson answered with rehearsed politeness. Good morning, gentlemen. Mrs. Sterling and her daughter are waiting for you. Marcus led the way, his smile too smooth, his eyes calculating. Elijah followed with his ever-present legal folder, Isaiah bringing up the rear with his watchful silence. Behind them, a gray-haired man in an expensive suit entered with measured authority. Mr. Chen, CFO of Sterling Investments. Naomi, Marcus greeted, his voice warm but hollow. We appreciate you agreeing to this meeting. We thought it best to bring in financial expertise to discuss a fair division. Naomi's lips curved into a polite smile. How thoughtful. Please, this way. They followed her through the grand hall into the dining room. The long oak table was set with bottled water, neatly stacked documents, and individual place settings. At the head stood a remote control. Naomi gestured. Please sit. Marcus settled at the center, Elijah beside him, Isaiah to the left, Mr. Chen opposite Chloe. The brothers looked at ease, confident, smug even. Marcus cleared his throat. We've reviewed the situation. David's passing left certain ambiguities regarding this property. As you know, Crestwood has been in the Sterling family for generations. While David reacquired it, morally it belongs to all of us. Our proposal remains the same, a three-way division. 1/3 to you, 1/3 to Chloe, and 1/3 shared between us. Everyone wins. Naomi raised an eyebrow. And what about the Western Acres? Elijah leaned forward smoothly. They're undevelopable, preservation land, of no real value. Excluding them keeps things simple. Naomi allowed a pause, then pressed the remote. A projector screen descended silently from the ceiling. With a click, a detailed survey of Crestwood appeared, complete with overlays of Summit Resort's Phase 2 plans. The brothers' confidence faltered. Mr. Chen leaned in, eyes narrowing. "What's this?" Naomi's voice was calm but cutting. "The truth. The Western Acres are the linchpin of Phase 2. The golf course, the expansion, the resort's projected profits. It all depends on Crestwood. And you knew that, Marcus. You all did." Marcus flushed. "That's speculative." Another voice cut him off. "Not speculative. Confirmed." The side door opened, and in walked Mr. Alston, CEO of Summit Resorts, flanked by two executives and Mr. Harrison. The Sterling brothers froze. "Mr. Hare." Alston's tone was cordial but sharp. "Gentlemen, I was curious to see how far you'd take this charade. You approached us claiming authority to negotiate over Crestwood. That was misleading. Crestwood belongs to Mrs. Naomi Sterling, legally, unequivocally." Elijah bristled. "This is a private family matter." "No," Naomi interjected, her voice firm. "This is a matter of law and deceit. My husband purchased Crestwood legitimately. He restored it, preserved it, and left it to me. You had no claim until Summit announced expansion, and suddenly greed overcame blood." She slid documents across the table, copies from David's war room. "You've misled Summit, attempted to manipulate my daughter, and presented fraudulent claims." Mr. Chen flipped open the packet, his face paling as he scanned the contents. Financial misdeeds, fraudulent transfers, tax evasion. "Is this real?" he demanded, looking at Marcus and Elijah. "Exaggerations," Marcus muttered, but the sweat on his brow betrayed him. Chloe's voice rang out, strong. "Not exaggerations. My father told me in his videos what you did to him when he was 19. You forged his name, you stole his inheritance, and you threatened him into silence. He walked away. He built a life, and you're still the same men now. Greedy, deceitful, ruthless." The brothers shifted uneasily under her accusation. Naomi leaned forward, her eyes steady on Marcus. "You thought you were dealing with a widow too weak to fight. You thought Chloe would be your pawn. But David anticipated everything. He left us the truth, the documents, and the strategy." Mr. Alston cleared his throat. "Mrs. Sterling, Summit is prepared to make a substantial offer for Crestwood under your terms. Environmental preservation, studio, and conservatory intact. We'll sign a memorandum of understanding today." Mr. Chen snapped his folder shut, his face a mask of fury. "You lied to me," he spat at the brothers. "You presented yourselves as sole negotiators. This is professional suicide." He stood, addressing Naomi. "Mrs. Sterling, my apologies for wasting your time. I'll have no further involvement in Sterling Investments." And with that, he strode out, slamming the door. Silence hung heavy. Marcus's mask cracked, his polished confidence collapsing into raw anger. "You think this is over?" he hissed. "You've humiliated us, exposed us. You don't know who you're dealing with." Naomi stood, unflinching. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with. 3 men so blinded by greed they couldn't see the fortress David built around me. You are finished here. Leave Crestwood. Do not return. If you do, these documents go to the IRS, the SEC, and every investor you've ever conned." Elijah's lips thinned, his legal folder trembling in his hands. Isaiah avoided her eyes, silent as ever. Chloe rose beside her mother. "Dad always said the biggest mistake anyone could make was underestimating Naomi Sterling. Today, you proved him right." Mr. Alston extended his hand to Naomi. "Shall we draft the agreement?" Naomi shook his hand, her grip firm. "Yes. Crestwood will not be divided. It will not be stolen. It will be preserved as David intended, and as I now intend." The meeting ended with the Sterling brothers storming out, their empire of intimidation crumbling behind them. Summit's executives remained, already drafting terms. As Naomi and Chloe exchanged a quiet glance, Naomi felt the shift deep within her. Grief had become strength. Vulnerability had become armor. David's war was now her war, and she had just won the first decisive battle. The day after the showdown at Crestwood, the estate was quieter than it had been in weeks. The brothers were gone, their threats muted by humiliation and exposure. Yet Naomi knew better than to believe the war was truly over. Men like Marcus and Elijah did not vanish into silence. They regrouped, recalculated, and waited for weakness. For the moment, however, Naomi allowed herself the luxury of peace. She stood in the conservatory, the morning sun spilling over rows of orchids in full bloom. Chloe sat nearby, sketching idly in a notebook, the faint lines of an unfinished drawing taking shape. "Do you realize," Chloe said, not looking up, "this is the first morning we've had here without some kind of ambush?" Naomi smiled faintly. "Yes, and that's exactly why we shouldn't waste it." After breakfast, Naomi and Chloe returned to the study, laptop in hand. For days they had watched David's daily videos together, messages recorded with such foresight it felt as though he were still in the room. But today Naomi felt a tension in the air. She knew the sequence of videos was leading somewhere. Chloe opened the file marked Day 50. David's face appeared on screen, his familiar crooked smile softening the sting of his absence. "My loves," he began, "if you've made it this far, it means the brothers have already tried something. Maybe legal tricks, maybe intimidation, but you're still standing, which means you've already won more than they ever expected. I'm proud of you both." Chloe's eyes shimmered. Naomi reached over, squeezing her hand. David continued, his expression more serious now. "But you must understand, the Crestwood estate is not just about the land. There is something deeper here, something hidden. My father, he left more behind than debts and bitterness. In the vault, behind the second row of cabinets, you'll find a locked drawer. The key is in the conservatory, taped beneath the bench where Naomi likes to read." The pounding on the heavy oak door echoed through the silent hall, each strike sharper than the last. Naomi Sterling pressed her back against the cool wall, heart racing. Through the window, 3 men stood on the porch, faces unmistakably cut from the same mold as her late husband. Brothers, strangers, predators. Their voices carried in, demanding entry, claiming the house as theirs. Naomi tightened her grip on the blue folder in her hands, the last weapon David had left her. She had promised him once never to set foot here. Now, surrounded by secrets, threats, and the ghost of her husband, she understood why. 2 months earlier, Naomi had buried David after a sudden stroke at 58. They had shared 17 years of marriage, ordinary years, or so she thought. Then came the call from Mr. Harrison, David's attorney. Sitting in his office, Naomi had been handed a small antique key and a letter in her husband's handwriting. Her name, written with the care she had always known. The key was to Crestwood Estate, a property David had purchased in Lake Arrowhead 4 years before without ever mentioning it. She remembered the shock. David never spoke of his childhood here, never mentioned another house. And yet he had not only bought it back but renovated it, hiding it until after his death. Harrison explained the cruel twist. The property had skyrocketed in value because of a luxury resort project nearby. Developers had made multi-million-dollar offers. Worse, David's brothers had filed a legal challenge, claiming he wasn't of sound mind when he bought it. Naomi's hands shook as she opened David's letter that night. His words spilled across the page. Apologies for secrets, confessions of illness he had never revealed, and a plea that she visit the estate just once. Inside the study, he said, she would find his laptop, a password only she could decipher, the date of their first meeting followed by the word hope. That single word brought tears to her eyes. So she had come. Driven through winding mountain roads, unlocked the iron gates, and stepped into a mansion transformed from the ruins of David's childhood into something breathtaking. Every wall was covered with orchids, her lifelong passion, his silent tribute. But no sooner had she discovered the silver laptop than the black SUV rolled in behind her. 3 men emerged, the Sterling brothers. The inheritance war had arrived at her doorstep, and Naomi, widow or not, would not be the easy prey they expected. The pounding on the door did not stop. Naomi's pulse thundered as she stepped back into the shadow of the towering stone fireplace, clutching the blue folder tighter against her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to escape into the woods behind Crestwood, but another voice inside, the one David had nurtured all their years together, told her to stand firm. "Mrs. Sterling," the voice boomed again, deeper this time, impatient. "We know you're in there. This is Marcus, David's brother. We need to talk." Naomi squeezed her eyes shut for a moment. Marcus, the one David rarely mentioned except with a clenched jaw or a quick change of subject. And now here he was, pounding at her husband's secret sanctuary. She glanced toward the table by the wide window. The silver laptop still sat there, untouched, a single white orchid resting on its lid like a guardian. She wanted to open it, to hear David's voice, to understand why he had hidden so much from her. But outside, his brothers circled like vultures. Forcing herself to breathe, Naomi tiptoed to the side window and peered through the curtains. 3 men stood by the SUV, all of them unmistakably Sterling's. Straight noses, almond-shaped eyes, even the same set to their shoulders as David. But where David's presence had always radiated calm warmth, theirs carried calculation, entitlement. Marcus was older, his silvering hair slicked back, his tailored coat pressed sharp against his tall frame. Beside him stood Elijah, lean and restless, holding a leather folder Naomi suspected contained legal threats. The youngest, Isaiah, lingered behind, silent, but his gaze swept the property with a predator's patience. Naomi pulled away from the window, her mind racing. David had warned her in the letter, "They will come for the house." And here they were, less than 48 hours after she had first turned the key in the gate. The pounding resumed, rattling the door on its hinges. "Naomi," Marcus called, his voice edged with authority. "This property is not yours alone. Our family has a claim. You can either open the door and speak like civilized people, or we'll resolve this another way." Resolve. The word chilled her. She thought of David in his hospital bed, his hand gripping hers with the last of his strength. "Promise me you won't go to Crestwood," he had whispered. Now, standing in the very halls he had begged her to avoid, she understood the weight of that plea. But curiosity had driven her here, and love had anchored her to stay. Naomi looked at the folder in her hands. Inside were notarized deeds, certified bank statements, evidence that David had legally purchased Crestwood years ago. He had prepared her for this very confrontation. The pounding stopped. Silence pressed against the windows, heavier than the knocks themselves. Then came the crunch of footsteps on gravel. Naomi hurried to the side window again. The brothers were huddled by their SUV, voices sharp though muffled. Elijah gestured at the folder in his hand, shaking his head. Marcus slammed a fist against the car hood, his face tight with frustration. Naomi felt a flicker of satisfaction. They wanted her rattled. Instead, it was they who seemed unsettled. Her gaze drifted back to the laptop. Trembling, she placed the folder on the table, brushed the orchid aside, and flipped the lid open. The screen glowed to life, asking for a password. Her hands shook as she typed, October 12 Hope, the day she and David had first met in a campus library 25 years ago. The word that had carried them through struggles, miscarriages, careers, and dreams. Hope. The screen blinked, then opened to a folder titled simply, Naomi. Her breath caught. Hundreds of video files appeared, each labeled with dates stretching a full year beyond David's funeral. She clicked the first file, heart pounding. David's face filled the screen, not the frail, pale man she had last kissed goodbye in the sterile hospital room, but strong, vibrant, eyes lit with the mischievous warmth she had fallen in love with. "Hello, my love," he began, his smile crooked in the way that always made her chest ache. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone. And you've come to Crestwood. I begged you never to, but I should have known your heart and your stubbornness too well, so I prepared this for you." Naomi's throat tightened as tears filled her eyes. "I made a video for every day of your first year without me," David continued. "A year of companionship, a year of explanations, a year of love that doesn't end with death." He lowered his gaze for a moment, then lifted it again, determination in his eyes. "And I'll start with why I bought this house. The house I swore never to return to. You deserve the truth." Naomi leaned closer to the screen, clutching the table as if his voice could anchor her. Outside, the gravel crunched again. She glanced out the window. The brothers had returned to the porch, Marcus now holding a document pressed against the glass. A court order. Her heart thudded. They weren't just here to intimidate. They had come armed with the law. On the screen, David's voice hardened. "My brothers will come for this house, Naomi. They mocked me when I bought it. They laughed at the ruins. But now that the resort has made this land priceless, they will claw for it. They will lie, manipulate, even drag our daughter into their schemes. Do not trust them." Naomi's breath caught. Chloe, her daughter. Sweet, brilliant, fiery Chloe, who was still drowning in grief at college. The thought of Marcus and Elijah whispering in her ear filled Naomi with dread. "I bought Crestwood legally," David continued, his voice steady. "I have every document secured. The house is yours. But more than that, it's a gift, a sanctuary I rebuilt from the ashes of my childhood for you. Every stone, every flower, every corner was chosen with you in mind." Naomi wiped her cheeks with trembling fingers, her eyes scanning the room now filled with orchids. Her orchids. His love for her, painted into the walls themselves. A heavy knock startled her. This time it was not Marcus's voice, but another, authoritative. "Mrs. Sterling, county officer, we have a court order to inspect the property." Naomi's stomach dropped. Through the window, she saw the uniformed deputy flanked by the 3 Sterling brothers, their faces smug with victory. Her hand hovered over the laptop, torn between David's recorded comfort and the living threat outside. Then she remembered the folder. She snatched it from the table and strode to the door. When she opened it, Officer Davis stood tall, his expression professional, but not hostile. "Ma'am, these gentlemen have presented a claim regarding this property. I need to review the situation." Marcus stepped forward, his smile cool. "We understand this is overwhelming, Naomi, but Crestwood belongs to the family. David had no right to take it for himself. We can resolve this without conflict if you cooperate." Naomi met his gaze, the memory of David's voice echoing in her ears. "Do not trust them." "I have documents," she said firmly, holding out the folder. "My husband anticipated this. Everything you need to verify my ownership is inside." The officer accepted the folder, flipping through notarized deeds, bank statements, certified transfers, his brows furrowed as he examined each page. Marcus's confident smile faltered. Elijah leaned closer, trying to peek at the documents, while Isaiah shifted uncomfortably behind them. Finally, Officer Davis closed the folder and looked at Naomi. "These appear in order, ma'am. This property is legally yours. Any dispute will need to proceed through civil court. I cannot enforce an inspection today." Naomi exhaled slowly, relief flooding her chest. Behind the officer, Marcus's face flushed with anger. "This isn't over," he hissed, his mask slipping. "No," Naomi agreed, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "It's just beginning, and I am ready." She shut the door firmly, the echo reverberating through the grand hall. For a moment, silence returned. She turned back to the laptop, where David's frozen image smiled from the screen. Her husband had left her more than property. He had left her a battleground, a legacy, and a choice. And she would not face it trembling. Not anymore. Naomi sat motionless in the great room, long after the officer's footsteps had faded from the porch. The silence pressed down on her like a physical weight, broken only by the crackling of the stone fireplace. The laptop screen still glowed on the table, David's face frozen mid-smile, as if he were watching her reaction from across time. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand and pressed play again. "Naomi," David's recorded voice said gently, "if you've come this far, it means the brothers have already appeared. I know them too well. Marcus will charm, Elijah will intimidate with papers, and Isaiah will stand behind them like a silent blade. Don't let them divide you. Don't let them near Chloe." Her stomach clenched. Chloe. She hadn't even told their daughter yet about Crestwood. Was it cowardice? Or just her instinct to protect her from the firestorm she already saw building? David's voice shifted, steadier now, like a man about to confess a truth he had buried too deep for too long. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with a cerebral aneurysm, a time bomb in my head, the doctor said. They gave me 2 to 5 years. I didn't tell you, Naomi. I couldn't. I couldn't watch pity replace the love in your eyes. I wanted our last years together to feel normal. Naomi's hand flew to her mouth. The words sliced through her like glass. "You should have told me," she whispered to the screen, voice trembling. "You should have let me carry that burden with you." As if hearing her protest across the veil of time, David's expression softened. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But please believe me, it wasn't cowardice. It was love. I wanted to give you joy, not grief. And I wanted to use what time I had left to build something for you, something that would outlive me." The camera shifted slightly, revealing stacks of plans, photographs, and sketches spread across a desk. "I rebuilt Crestwood not just to reclaim what my brothers destroyed in our childhood, but to transform it into a sanctuary for you. Every orchid you love, every corner of peace you've dreamed of, it's here. This house is not a curse anymore, Naomi. It's my gift. Her chest heaved as sobs broke free, raw and uncontrollable. She had stood by his side through late nights, work trips, his distracted silences, never suspecting that each absence, each excuse, had been part of this desperate, loving construction. A knock startled her. But this time it wasn't the heavy fists of Marcus. It was lighter, hesitant. She wiped her eyes quickly and went to the door. A middle-aged woman stood there, holding a small sprayer in one hand. Her clothes smelled faintly of soil and orchids. "Mrs. Sterling?" she asked cautiously. "Yes," Naomi replied, uncertain. "I'm Miss Jackson. Mr. David hired me to care for the orchids here. He said if anything ever happened to him, I was to keep tending them and look after you if you came." Naomi blinked in surprise. This woman knew about Crestwood? About David's secret project? "Did you know him well?" Naomi asked, stepping aside to let her in. Miss Jackson entered, her eyes softening as they swept across the lush conservatory beyond the great room. "As well as he allowed anyone to. He was here at least once a month for 4 years, oversaw every renovation himself. He spoke of you often, said you had a gift with plants that he could never quite match." Naomi's throat tightened again. "Did he ever mention his illness?" Miss Jackson hesitated, then nodded. "Not directly, but I knew. He worked like a man with a deadline. He pushed himself harder each month. Sometimes I'd find him sitting in the conservatory long after dark, just staring at the orchids as if memorizing them. I thought he was exhausted. Now I understand." Naomi leaned against the doorway, absorbing this truth. While she had been teaching literature and trying to keep their lives ordinary, David had been racing against death to build her a kingdom of flowers. "His brothers were here too," Miss Jackson added, her voice tightening. Naomi's head snapped up. "They came here before?" "Last year, just after Summit Resorts announced their plans. They showed up uninvited while the studio was under construction. They didn't even recognize David at first. He'd grown out his beard from treatment. He left without speaking to them, but that night he changed the property plans." "What plans?" Miss Jackson's eyes flicked toward the back garden. "Come with me. He told me to show you this only if things grew dangerous." Curiosity outweighed fear as Naomi followed her across the lawn to a weathered shed tucked behind the conservatory. Unlike the rest of Crestwood, it looked untouched by renovations, deliberately ordinary. Inside, gardening tools leaned against dusty walls. Miss Jackson moved to the back corner, pushing aside crates until a square outline of a trapdoor appeared in the floor. Producing an old iron key, she lifted it open, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. "Your husband called it the vault," she said quietly. "I call it his war room. After his brothers showed up, he wanted to be prepared." Naomi's pulse hammered. She descended the ladder carefully, Miss Jackson following close behind. At the bottom, fluorescent lights flickered to life, illuminating a long concrete tunnel leading to a chamber lined with filing cabinets, maps, and a central table stacked with binders. Naomi turned in stunned silence. It was a bunker of secrets. "Welcome to David's war room," Miss Jackson said with quiet pride. Naomi's fingers brushed across a map pinned to the wall. It wasn't just Crestwood. It showed the surrounding valley, marked with red ink. "What is all this?" Miss Jackson stepped beside her. "David hired consultants. They discovered that Summit Resorts has been hiding the true scope of their project. Phase 2 is 3 times larger than what they announced publicly. They've already bought nearly all the land they need, except Crestwood." Naomi's eyes widened. "So this estate blocks their expansion?" "Exactly. Without it, the golf course and luxury extension collapse. Your property is worth far more than you think, and David knew his brothers would never stop once they realized it." Naomi's knees felt weak. She sank into the chair at the table, scanning the documents. Deeds, purchase records, architectural plans. Then another folder caught her eye, thick, heavy. She pulled it open and felt her blood run cold. Inside were printouts of emails, bank records, sworn affidavits, evidence of fraud, insider trading, and tax evasion, all tied to Marcus, Elijah, and Isaiah. Her hands shook as she flipped through the meticulous documentation. He built a case against them," Miss Jackson nodded. "He told me, If they come for Naomi, she must have more than sentiment. She must have weapons. Naomi sat back, overwhelmed. Her husband, who had hidden his illness, who had secretly rebuilt a house for her, had also prepared for war against his own blood. Above them, the estate stood silent, its orchids blooming in the conservatory. But here, underground, Naomi realized the truth. David had not just left her a home, he had left her a battlefield, and the arsenal to win it. She closed the folder, her hands steadier now. Whatever storm his brothers planned, she would not face it defenseless. For the first time since his death, Naomi felt something other than grief. She felt resolve. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Crestwood, painting the stone walls gold. Naomi hadn't slept. Her mind had churned all night, replaying David's recorded confessions, the vault's chilling revelations, and the officer's measured words. For the first time since her husband's death, she no longer felt crushed by grief alone. She felt the weight of a looming battle. Her phone vibrated on the nightstand. The screen flashed a name that made her chest tighten. Chloe. Naomi answered quickly. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" There was hesitation on the other end. Then Chloe's voice, tight and oddly formal. "Mom, why didn't you tell me about Dad's other house? Or the developer's offer? Uncle Marcus called me this morning. He said you're making things difficult." Naomi froze, blood draining from her face. They've already reached her. "Chloe, listen to me," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Your uncles are not looking out for you. They want the property. That's all. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything until we talk." "But Mom," Chloe's frustration bled through the phone. "You should have told me. Dad's family reached out when you didn't. They've been kind. They've shared photos of Dad as a kid, stories I never heard from you. Why would you hide that from me?" Naomi pressed a hand against the wall, steadying herself. "Because those stories come with strings attached. They will use your grief against you. Please, Chloe, trust me." Her daughter's sigh was sharp, wounded. "I'll call you later." The line went dead. Naomi's hand trembled as she lowered the phone. They weren't just coming after the estate. They were after her daughter's loyalty. Later that afternoon, the crunch of tires on gravel echoed once more. Naomi peered from the upstairs window, her heart stopping. A silver SUV had parked behind the Sterling brothers' black one. Chloe stepped out, her dark hair pulled back, her shoulders squared with determination. Beside her, Marcus greeted her warmly, placing a paternal hand on her shoulder as though she belonged to him. Elijah carried his ever-present legal folder. Isaiah lingered silently behind. Chloe's smile was soft but genuine as she shook each of their hands. Naomi's stomach twisted. She doesn't see it. She doesn't see the trap. Moments later, the front door swung open. Chloe entered with the brothers trailing behind her like shadows. "Mom," she said brightly, almost as if nothing had happened. "This place is incredible. Why didn't you ever tell me Dad rebuilt it?" Before Naomi could answer, Marcus stepped forward, his voice smooth as honey. "Naomi, I think we started off on the wrong foot yesterday. We're family. We should be united in this, not at odds." Naomi's eyes never left her daughter. "Chloe, we agreed you wouldn't meet with them until we talked." Her daughter flushed but lifted her chin. "I thought I should hear them out. They are Dad's brothers, after all. They're family, too." "Family?" Naomi's voice trembled, not from weakness but from a growing fury. "Family that your father spent a lifetime avoiding. Doesn't that strike you as strange?" Chloe's lips parted, but before she could answer, Elijah stepped in smoothly, flipping open his folder. "David bought this property from our father, but it was always meant to be shared among the brothers. We've drafted a fair settlement. 1/3 for Naomi, 1/3 for Chloe, 1/3 for the rest of us. Everyone wins." Marcus nodded, his hand still resting on Chloe's shoulder. "We're prepared to be very generous." Naomi's chest burned. "Generous?" she spat. "This property was David's gift to me, his legal gift. Your settlement isn't generosity. It's theft dressed as fairness." "Mom," Chloe interrupted, her eyes wide. "But think about it. We don't need all this space. We could sell it, take the money, and live comfortably for the rest of our lives. Uncle Marcus said." Naomi's heart cracked at the sound of that phrase. Uncle Marcus. She had known him less than a day, and already Chloe was speaking as though he belonged to her life. "Stop," Naomi said, her voice low but fierce. "You don't see it. They're not family. They're opportunists. They want this land because of the resort, not because they loved your father, not because they care about you. Elijah's eyes glinted as he slid a document across the table. Naomi, we understand this is difficult, but fighting us in court will cost you dearly. We're offering peace. Don't let your grief cloud your judgment. Naomi slammed her palm on the table, startling even herself. Grief has not clouded my judgment. It has sharpened it. I will not be bullied in my own home. The room fell silent. For a moment, only the ticking of the antique clock filled the air. Then Chloe's voice, quieter now, broke through. Mom, why did Dad hide this from us? Why didn't he tell us about Crestwood? Naomi's throat closed. She thought of David's videos, his confession about the aneurysm, his fear of overshadowing their last years with pity. She wanted to tell Chloe everything, but not here. Not with the brothers circling like wolves. Your father had reasons, Naomi said carefully. Reasons I'll explain when we're alone. Chloe folded her arms, her expression conflicted. It just feels like secrets on top of secrets. How can I know what's true? Before Naomi could respond, Miss Jackson appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Mrs. Sterling, is everything all right? Marcus's face hardened. This is a family matter. Perhaps your employee should excuse herself. She's not just an employee, Naomi snapped. She's part of this household, and she stays. Elijah smirked. Her employment status is among the disputed assets pending resolution. Naomi stepped forward, planting herself between Chloe and the brothers. Enough. You will not dictate terms in this house. Not to me, not to her, and certainly not to my daughter. Marcus's mask slipped, the businessman beneath surfacing. Naomi, this property is worth tens of millions. We can do this amicably, or we can make it very, very difficult. You don't have the resources to fight us. Naomi's fury turned cold. You underestimate me. You always underestimated David. That was your mistake then, and it will be your downfall now. She turned to Chloe, her voice softening. Sweetheart, you can stay if you like. This is your home, but your uncles are leaving. Now. The brothers exchanged dark glances. Marcus's jaw clenched, but Elijah closed his folder and tucked it under his arm. Isaiah said nothing, his silence heavier than any argument. We'll be back, Marcus said flatly. This isn't finished. They swept out, the sound of their SUV engines roaring down the driveway a moment later. Chloe lingered, her face torn. Mom, they don't seem like monsters. They've been kind to me. They've shown me things about Dad I never knew. Naomi felt her anger ebb into exhaustion. She reached out, cupping her daughter's cheek. Kindness is easy when someone wants something from you. Remember that, Chloe, please. Her daughter's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I don't know who to believe. Naomi pulled her close, whispering fiercely. Believe your father. Believe what he left us. And when you're ready, I'll show you everything he wanted you to know. The video ended, leaving silence heavy in the room. Chloe jumped up. The bench! I'll check. Within minutes, she returned, holding a tiny iron key. Naomi led her to the vault. They pulled aside the filing cabinets, finding the inconspicuous drawer David had described. Naomi slid the key into the lock, and with a click, the drawer opened. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, worn and weathered, the edges frayed by time. Naomi opened it carefully, the pages filled with her father-in-law's handwriting. The entries painted a grim portrait, confessions of gambling debts, shady deals, and the slow ruin of a family name. But woven among the bitterness was something else, references to parcels of land in the mountains, deeds passed secretly through the generations. Naomi realized with a start that Crestwood was larger than even David had mapped. Hidden beneath layers of shell companies and false records were tracts of forest and lakefront property that still tied back to the Sterling name. This isn't just an estate, Naomi whispered. It's a kingdom, and your father knew. Chloe frowned. So what happens now? Do we tell Summit? Do we keep it secret? Naomi closed the journal, her decision forming even as the weight of it pressed on her shoulders. We keep it safe. David didn't fight for this just to hand it to strangers. It's part of our legacy now. That evening, Naomi sat on the porch as dusk painted the mountains in shades of gold and violet. Chloe joined her with 2 mugs of tea, her expression softer than it had been weeks. You know, Mom, Chloe said, I think Dad knew what he was doing leaving this to you. Not just because you'd protect it, but because you'd use it. He trusted you to carry the family forward. Naomi felt her throat tighten. He trusted both of us, Chloe. That's why he left the videos, the studio, even the orchids. He wanted us to remember we're more than what his brothers think. We're creators, builders, survivors. Chloe leaned against her shoulder, silent for a long while. Then she murmured, "I'm sorry for doubting you, for listening to them." Naomi kissed the top of her daughter's head. We were both grieving. They knew how to exploit that. What matters is that we're here now, together. The following morning brought new visitors, this time not hostile. A group of summit executives arrived with conservation specialists. They walked the grounds with Naomi, discussing terms, measuring soil, sketching plans that would protect the estate's beauty while still integrating into the resort's expansion. At every turn, Naomi asserted her conditions. No bulldozing of the forest, no destruction of the conservatory. A permanent endowment for orchid research in David's name. Summit hesitated at first, but eventually relented, sensing both the leverage Naomi held and the goodwill such conditions could earn them publicly. For Naomi, it wasn't just about winning. It was about honoring David's vision. Crestwood would not be sacrificed for profit. It would become a living memorial, a fusion of past and future, of grief and growth. That night, Naomi returned alone to the art studio. She stood before the massive blank canvas David had left, the one he had asked her to fill when she was ready. She wasn't ready yet, not fully, but for the first time, she felt the stirrings of inspiration. The house was quiet, Chloe asleep upstairs, Miss Jackson tending the orchids. Naomi stood in the glow of moonlight filtering through the tall windows and whispered softly into the silence, "I'm still here, David, and I'll finish what you started." Naomi sat in the studio long after midnight, the glow of the laptop illuminating her tired face. She had watched David's videos every day, sometimes with Chloe, sometimes alone. They had carried her through grief, through battles, through revelations she never thought she was strong enough to endure. But now she reached the folder marked Final Week. The anticipation in her chest was almost unbearable. She clicked the file labeled Day 100. David's face appeared, more somber than before, the smile faint but steady. "My love," he began, "if you've reached this point, then you already know more than I ever expected you would. You've uncovered the journal, you've seen the war room, and you've realized Crestwood is more than just land. It's leverage. It's legacy. And now you must decide what to do with it." Naomi's hand hovered over the trackpad. Decide. The word carried a weight heavier than any courtroom battle or family feud. David leaned closer to the camera, his eyes burning with intensity. "I didn't buy this estate for profit. I didn't fight my brothers so they could be richer. I bought it to undo the curse of our past. My father destroyed everything he touched, our childhood, our family, our name. I wanted Crestwood to become the opposite of that, a place of beauty, of creation, of healing. But Naomi, whether you keep it or not, that's up to you. Don't let my memory bind you. Let it free you." Naomi closed the laptop abruptly, tears pricking her eyes. She wasn't ready. The next morning, Chloe found her in the conservatory, standing motionless among the orchids. "Mom, you didn't come to bed." Naomi forced a smile. "I was with your father." Chloe's eyes softened. "Another video?" "Yes, he's asking me to decide whether to keep this place or let it go." Chloe frowned. "But we fought so hard. How can you even think about letting it go?" Naomi touched the petal of a rare orchid, its delicate color glowing in the light. "Because maybe holding on too tightly is just another kind of prison." That afternoon, Harrison returned with papers from Summit Resorts, formal agreements waiting for Naomi's signature. She read the terms carefully. Summit had conceded more than she expected. Protections for the conservatory, funding for orchid research, even a clause preserving the art studio as a historic landmark. "Mrs. Sterling," Harrison said gently, "you could walk away now with more money than you and Chloe would ever need. Or you could keep the estate, manage it yourself, and fight whatever battles still come. Both options are legitimate. Both honor David in different ways." Naomi stared at the contract, her chest tight. She thought of David's last words. "Don't let my memory bind you." Was keeping Crestwood a tribute or a chain? That evening, Naomi and Chloe sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. "Do you ever wonder?" Chloe asked. What Dad would have done if he'd lived? Naomi considered. He would have kept fighting because that's who he was, but he also knew I wasn't him. He left me choices, Chloe, choices he never had. Chloe was silent for a moment, then reached into her pocket. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. I found this in Dad's journal. It's not an entry, it's a sketch. Look. Naomi unfolded the page. It was a crude drawing of the Crestwood property, but instead of walls and gates, it showed gardens, open walkways, a greenhouse labeled community center. Beneath it, in David's handwriting, someday, this place will belong to more than just us. Naomi felt her throat tighten again. David hadn't only been building a refuge for his family. He had dreamed of something bigger, something lasting. Late that night, Naomi opened the laptop one last time. The final video file blinked on the screen. Day 120, Naomi's choice. David's face appeared thinner now, his illness more evident. Yet his eyes were calm, resolved. If you're watching this, he said softly, then the time has come. I can't guide you anymore. Only you can decide what Crestwood becomes. Keep it, sell it, transform it. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you live, really live. Paint again, grow again, love again. Don't let me be the last chapter of your story. He smiled faintly, the smile she had fallen in love with decades ago. And remember, Naomi, whatever you choose, you already gave me more than I ever deserved. Until someday, my love. The screen went black. Naomi sat in the silence of the studio, her tears falling freely. She looked at the blank canvas leaning against the wall, waiting for her hand. She looked at the orchids glowing in the conservatory and at the contract on the table. She realized then that the decision wasn't about keeping or selling. It was about transformation. Crestwood would not be just a fortress or a fortune. It would become what David dreamed, a place of creation, of healing, of legacy. Naomi picked up a brush, dipped it in paint, and pressed the first stroke onto the canvas. The choice had been made. The morning air at Crestwood was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp soil. Naomi stood on the porch, a mug of coffee warming her hands, as she surveyed the estate that had once felt like a burden and now pulsed with possibility. The decision had been made. Crestwood would not be sold, nor hoarded as a private refuge. It would live. Summit Resorts had agreed to her terms. Environmental protections, the conservatory untouched, the art studio preserved, and a permanent endowment for orchid research. But Naomi intended to go further. She envisioned community gardens, artist residencies, and educational programs in David's name. Crestwood would be more than a sanctuary for her family. It would be a legacy for others. Chloe joined her, hair tousled from sleep, holding her own mug. You've been up since dawn, haven't you? Naomi smiled. Old habits. Plans don't let me sleep. Chloe leaned against the railing. So, you're really going to do it? Open Crestwood to the public? Yes, Naomi said firmly. Your father wanted this place to undo the past. His brothers saw it as a gold mine. I see it as a seed. If we plant it right, it will outlive all of us. Chloe was quiet for a long time, then nodded slowly. I think he'd be proud. And maybe I will be too. Later that week, Naomi began preparations. Contractors walked the grounds to plan renovations. Conservationists cataloged the orchids. Local officials arrived to discuss permits. The once hidden estate buzzed with life, every room echoing with the hum of new purpose. But Naomi knew it couldn't be that easy. She sensed it before it happened. On a gray Friday afternoon, Miss Jackson appeared in the doorway of the studio, her face grave. Mrs. Sterling, Marcus is here, alone. Naomi froze. She had not seen David's eldest brother since the humiliating collapse of their scheme. Her first instinct was to send him away. But curiosity and something deeper, more complicated, made her pause. Bring him to the porch, Naomi said finally. But he doesn't step inside. Marcus looked thinner, older. The arrogance that once clung to him like armor, now stripped away. He stood with his hands clasped, a man who had lost more than a property. Naomi, he said quietly, thank you for seeing me. Her eyes narrowed. If you're here to start another battle, don't waste your breath. You've lost. Marcus shook his head. I know. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to apologize. Naomi crossed her arms, wary. After everything you did, after trying to turn Chloe against me, I was wrong, Marcus admitted, his voice hoarse. I thought Crestwood was just money, land, power. I didn't see what David saw, and now, he hesitated, his shoulders slumping. Now I don't have much time left. Naomi's breath caught. What do you mean? Marcus's eyes met hers, hollow yet sincere. Cancer, stage 4. It's spreading fast, puts things in perspective. Silence stretched between them. Naomi searched his face for deception, but saw only exhaustion. I didn't come for sympathy, Marcus continued. I came because I found something in my father's belongings. I thought you, or Chloe, should have it. He handed her a faded photograph. 3 boys beneath a massive oak tree. The youngest, unmistakably David, held a small potted orchid, his smile bright and unguarded. Naomi traced the image with her fingers. The first orchid he ever grew. Marcus nodded. We destroyed it, Elijah and I. Out of spite. I've regretted it ever since. His voice cracked. David deserved better brothers than us. Naomi studied him. For years, Marcus had been the embodiment of everything cruel in David's past. Yet here he was, stripped of pride, a man standing at the edge of his life. Would you like to see the conservatory? She asked softly, surprising herself. For a moment, Marcus hesitated. Then he nodded. They walked among the orchids in silence. Naomi watched as Marcus lingered at each bloom, his hand trembling as he reached out but never touched. David did all this? He asked finally. Yes, Naomi replied. Every petal, every wall, every plan. He built it with love, not greed. Marcus swallowed hard. And you're going to carry it forward? Naomi's voice was steady. Yes, for him, for Chloe, for everyone who needs a place like this. Marcus exhaled, his shoulders sagging. Then maybe David finally won, not just against us, but against everything our father ruined. When he left, Naomi felt an unexpected lightness. Forgiveness was not absolution, but it was release. For the first time, she saw Marcus not as a villain, but as a broken man facing his end. That night, Naomi opened David's last video once more, just to hear his voice. We continue, he had said, in the decisions you will make, in the beauty you will create, in the legacy you will leave behind. Naomi closed the laptop, walked into the great room, and gazed at the massive canvas she had begun to paint. Layers of color, images of past and present, David's orchid glowing at the center. But now she knew what was missing. She dipped her brush in paint and added a new figure. Marcus, small, distant but present. Not as a conqueror, not as a monster, but as a man who, in his final days, sought redemption. Crestwood's story was no longer about battle. It was about transformation. And Naomi, brush in hand, knew the future was finally hers to shape. The grand gates of Crestwood stood open for the first time in decades. Beyond them, the estate buzzed with quiet excitement. Conservationists preparing displays of rare orchids, local artists arranging easels in the studio, and townspeople gathering at the entrance, curiosity mingling with reverence. Naomi adjusted the microphone on the small stage set up in front of the conservatory. Chloe stood beside her, shoulders squared, eyes bright with pride. Miss Jackson lingered in the crowd, her smile steady as always. Naomi cleared her throat. For many years, Crestwood was hidden, buried in silence, in secrets, in fear. My husband, David Sterling, brought it back to life. He restored it not for wealth, not for power, but for beauty, for hope. Today, we honor his vision by opening these doors. Crestwood will be a place of art, of science, of healing, a place for everyone. The crowd erupted in applause. Chloe leaned in, whispering, "He'd be proud, Mom." Naomi's eyes glistened. "He already is." Inside the conservatory, children pressed their faces to the glass, marveling at the orchids glowing in the sunlight. Artists dipped brushes into bright colors. A local musician played softly in the background, the notes floating like whispers through the halls. Naomi stood in the studio, gazing at her canvas. It was no longer blank, no longer just a symbol of grief. Layers of paint told the story of Crestwood, orchids blooming, mountains rising, shadows of the past fading into light. At the center, David's face, not as a ghost, but as part of the living tapestry. She placed the brush down, stepped back, and took Chloe's hand. For the first time since David's death, Naomi didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was beginning, and Crestwood, alive with voices and laughter, was beginning too.